My earliest memory of him is from when I was 5 years old. I was playing in the backyard of my childhood home, running around in the tall grass, pretending I was a pirate. It was a warm summer day, the kind of day that feels endless when you're that young. My mom was inside making lunch, and I was completely lost in my imaginary world. Until I wasn't. I remember looking up, the sun casting long shadows as it dipped lower in the sky, and seeing him for the first time. He stood at the edge of the woods that bordered our property, tall, impossibly tall, and thin, with arms that seemed too long, too flexible. His face, I don't know how to describe it, blank, featureless, as if someone had erased it entirely. He wore a black suit, which only made him stand out more against the trees. At first, I thought it was someone playing a trick on me, a scarecrow maybe, or some Halloween decoration my older brother had left out to freak me out. But then he moved, slowly, deliberately. I don't remember much after that. I just know that I ran inside screaming. And when my mom rushed to calm me down, I couldn't explain what I'd seen. She chalked it up to a child's imagination, the result of too many scary stories or a bad dream. But I knew better. I had seen something real. That was the first time I encountered Slender Man, but it wouldn't be the last. By the time I was a teenager, the sightings had become more frequent. I never told anyone. Not my parents, not my friends. How could I? How do you explain that you're being stalked by something that isn't supposed to exist? I started seeing him everywhere, standing at the edge of schoolyards, lurking in the distance on the way home, sometimes even outside my bedroom window at night. Every time I saw him, the same wave of dread washed over me. My body would freeze, my heart racing, my breath shallow. And then when I blinked, he would be gone. But I knew he was always watching, always waiting. I tried to ignore him, to pretend he wasn't there. But it became harder with each passing year. My grades slipped, my friendships dissolved, and I became a shell of the person I used to be. I couldn't sleep, constantly plagued by nightmares of those long, thin arms reaching out for me. The insomnia was unbearable. No matter how exhausted I was, I could never fully relax, always afraid that if I let my guard down, he would come for me. It wasn't just my imagination, there were signs. Things would go missing from my room, small things, like a pencil, a book, a photograph. And in their place, I would find something else. A twig, a piece of fabric, sometimes nothing at all. Just an empty space where the object had been. At first, I thought it was my brother, playing tricks on me. But when he left for college and the disappearances continued, I knew it had to be him. Slender Man was real, and he was getting closer. By the time I turned 21, I had accepted that this was my life now. The sightings had become less frequent, but the fear was constant. It was always there, lurking in the back of my mind, like a shadow I couldn't escape. I dropped out of college, unable to focus on anything other than staying safe, staying hidden. I moved back home with my parents, but that only made things worse. The house, once filled with the warmth of childhood memories, now felt cold and empty. I spent most of my days locked in my room, scanning the windows for any sign of him. I knew it was only a matter of time before he came for me. I had read the stories online, the accounts of others who had seen him. Some people said he was a myth, an internet creation, but I knew better. He was real, and he was relentless. One night, the nightmares became unbearable. I dreamt I was in the woods again, running through the trees, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps slow and deliberate, always just out of sight. No matter how fast I ran, I couldn't escape him. And then, just as I thought I was free, I tripped, falling face first into the dirt. When I looked up, he was standing over me, his long, pale fingers reaching down. I woke up screaming, drenched in sweat. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might burst from my chest. I sat up in bed, trying to calm myself, to tell myself it was just a dream. But then I saw the figure standing in the corner of my room. He was there, watching me. For a moment, I couldn't move. My body was paralyzed with fear, my mind racing as I tried to comprehend what was happening. His presence filled the room, suffocating me with dread. The shadows seemed to bend around him, twisting and warping in ways that made no sense. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, his blank face staring in my direction. I scrambled out of bed, my legs shaky and back towards the door. My hand fumbled for the light switch, but when the room flooded with light, he was gone. The corner where he had stood was empty, as if he had never been there at all. But I knew he had been. I knew it wasn't a dream this time. I couldn't stay in that house anymore. I packed a bag and left in the middle of the night, driving aimlessly through the empty streets until I found myself at the edge of the woods. The same woods where I had first seen him all those years ago. I don't know what drew me there. Maybe some part of me thought that confronting him, facing him head on, would make it stop. Maybe I was tired of running, tired of living in fear. Or maybe I knew that this was where it would all end. The woods were eerily quiet as I stepped out of the car, the wind rustling through the trees like a whispered warning. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly into the darkness. I took a deep breath and started walking, my feet crunching on the dead leaves beneath me. It didn't take long before I felt him. That familiar sensation of being watched, of being followed. I turned around, but there was nothing there. Just the empty forest, silent and still. I kept walking, my heart racing, my body tense. And then I saw him. He was standing at the edge of the clearing, just like before. His tall, thin figure barely visible in the moonlight. His arms hung limply at his sides. His featureless face turned toward me. This time I didn't run. I couldn't. I was tired of living in fear, tired of being hunted. I stood there, staring back at him, waiting for whatever was going to happen next. For a long moment, nothing happened. We just stood there, facing each other, the distance between us seeming to stretch on forever. And then slowly, he began to move. His arms stretched out, longer than should have been possible, reaching towards me with unnatural grace. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if he had all the time in the world. I felt my body seize up with fear, my muscles locking in place as he drew closer and closer. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but I couldn't. It was as if his very presence had rooted me to the spot, my mind paralyzed with terror. His fingers, long and spindly, hovered just inches from my face, and I knew, deep down, that this was the end. But then something strange happened. He stopped. His fingers didn't touch me. They hovered there, impossibly close, but never made contact. His blank face, though expressionless, seemed to tilt slightly, as if he were considering something, as if he were curious. And then, just as quickly as he had appeared, he was gone. The air around me seemed to shift, the oppressive weight of his presence lifting. I gasped, stumbling backward, my body trembling with adrenaline and fear. I don't know why he spared me that night. Maybe he was never going to take me. Maybe he just wanted to remind me that he could. Or maybe he's waiting, biding his time, watching me from the shadows, ready to strike when I least expect it. I left the woods that night, but I know I'll never truly escape him. He's still out there somewhere, lurking in the darkness, watching, and I know one day he'll come for me again. Like and subscribe for more stories like this.